In this video, I am going to use the alternate seam start to seam these two pieces of stockinette. And the one thing I want to point out is that the tension on these swatches is not ideal because I was using larger needle sizes than I would typically use. And I wanted to make the stitches large. Now, the first step is to identify on both pieces where to start the seam. And notice that I've got stockinette and I've used the smooth side of the cast on edge. A lot of knitters prefer to use the bumpy side, and what determines that is when you work your first row, do you consider, when you work your first row, do you start on the wrong side or the right side? Because the first row of the long tail cast on produces the first row of stitches. Now I'm going to go over here, and the one thing I want to do is look at my cast on edge. Now, typically, if I were doing the figure eight, I'd just go in here and there I go, I'm happy. And that works fine, but I kind of prefer this one because what it does is it forces me to line everything up properly. Now, here is the first part of the cast on edge. I'll bring that up a bit. And if I look closely, I can see that there's a little strand of yarn under here. And that is part of the cast on edge. The cast on edge uses 2 strands of yarn. And sometimes I might think, oh, this is the second loop of my cast on, because looking at it right now, that's kind of hard to see, isn't it? But if I follow that yarn up, I'll see that it is actually my first row of stitches. And that's why that stitch is so large. I've been pulling this thing out here. So I've got my cast on edge here, dig down and find that one, and those are the 2 loops that I'm going to be worried about. Now let's look on the other side. A little easier to see it here because this is a much larger stitch. It's an over large stitch, and it's the part of the cast on. That row is produced, and so it's easier to see. I've got the bottom one and I've got the top one. The fact that the yarn tail is there complicates that issue. Now, if you like to have the bumpy side, it's easy to see on the bumpy side where these are. And how I know is this is the first stitch. If I look at it, that's the first stitch produced by the cast on, so I know that both of those strands coming in and out of here are part of the cast on edge. The same is true on the other side. Now I'm going to line it up because I want this to be the right side. A little later on I'm going to do a reverse stockinette, another video. So first step, go into the first loop from the bottom to the top of the swatch, or from the back to the front. You see different terminology. I'm going to do the same on this side. I'm going to go in and catch that guy. Whoops. All these strands of yarn. Okay. You see how I've got those going. Now, I'm going to go into the exact same location. And remember, on this one, it was a little hard to see. I'm going to catch the second loop. Again, going from the bottom to the top, from the back to the front. And I'm going to do the same on this side where it's easier to see. Whoops. Get those out of there. And I have the 2 loops caught. Now I want to leave a yarn tail. And then I'm just going to very quickly mattress stitch the rest of this, and that's the reason why these swatches are so short. And if you've not done the mattress stitch before, which if you're doing the master's program you should have, you just catch the horizontal line strand between the selvage stitch and the first column of stitches. Let me see this in progress. And I want to get to the top to show you where to place the final stitch. And I always use much longer seaming thread than I need. All right, now I'm in the last, done the last row, and I want to catch. What I see some people do is go through the selvage stitch or the chain at the top, the bind off. No, what you want to do is identify the chain on the top and then go underneath it to get that little strand of yarn that is underneath the chain. Again, the easiest way to do that is to pull it up, and then if you pull it up, you should be able to see that little strand immediately under the chain. Now, the difference between this and the figure 8 you'll get right here, and that is I want to hold on to that strand of yarn. The figure 8 locks it at the bottom. This one does not. You can pull from both ends, and there you go. And it is lined up at the bottom, and if I were to weave in my yarn tail, which I would be doing, you would see that it looks pretty good. And at the top, I would weave my yarn tail in, going back through that way. For the master's program, you leave these strands done loose so they can check it.